Welcome back, Gothamites. If you're new here, hi. I'm London, aka History of the Batman. Now, one of the most popular questions that I have received from Gothamites over several years, and probably one of my favorite questions to answer, is I want to start reading Batman comics. But where do I start? And this is a very valid question because A, Batman has been featured in thousands now of comics, and trying to figure out where to start, what to read can be very daunting. There's so much good material. And B, for many people who like the Batman character, comics isn't the first place that they discovered him. It was probably a movie or a TV series or even a video game. So I'm always glad when people want to start reading Batman comics because of their love for the character in another medium. I have done a Batman 101 type of list on my podcast, which is linked in the description below. New shows will be out this fall. Yay. And on my Instagram, which is at History of the Batman. I don't know why you're not following yet. You totally should. But for this video, I wanted to set up a unique guide to help you figure out what to read when it comes to the Dark Knight, so that you not only can learn about the man himself, Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, but the Batman family, villains, and his entire mythology, so you can know great jumping off points to begin exploring and learning more about the Caped Crusader. Before we dive into all of these amazing comics, why don't you subscribe to this channel and become a part of this wonderful Gothamite community. To start this Batman 101 list, our first small group will be focusing on the origin story. Now, of course, if you have never picked up a Batman comic before, you know Batman's origin story because it is in every film, TV show, video game, everything. You just know it. But if you want to read more about his origin story, these are the comics you need to check out. Our first is 1939's Detective Comics issue 33. The intro story in this comic, which was written by Batman co-creator Bill Finger, which is now dubbed The Legend of Batman and How He Came to Be, is the very first time that Bruce Wayne's origin story of how he transformed into Batman was ever told. And if you don't know the origin story, which hey, you may not, and if you are new to Batman entirely, it is so nice to meet you. The story is a young Bruce Wayne witnesses the murder of his parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne, by a random mugger. And because of the death of his parents, Bruce Wayne vows to avenge their deaths and protect his city of Gotham. And even this story in particular shows that Bruce Wayne grew up, trained his brilliant mind to learn all the sciences, and trained his body into peak physical condition. And after receiving inspiration for his vigilante guise with a bat flying through his father's study, Bruce Wayne decided to become the Shadow of the Bat, called The Batman. 1939's Detective Comics 33 has been reprinted in so many different trade paperbacks, and you can buy the original Detective 33 on the DC Comics app, so there are many ways to check out the very first time Batman's origin was told. Our next important origin story comes in 1976's Detective Comics 457, which is a story written by Denny O'Neil and illustrated by Dick Giordano, and it is called There Is No Hope in Crime Alley. This story is important because it establishes the place where Bruce Wayne's parents were gunned down, called Crime Alley. And it is important for the introduction to the character Leslie Tompkins. This story overall is beautifully and tragically written, and Giordano's art is incredible. It sets the tone for future stories and movies and TV shows and video games to depict Crime Alley, and it all started with this 1976 classic issue. Our next important origin story is by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli, and it is 1967's 4-issue arc Batman Year 1, which was originally published in Batman Volume 1 issues 404 to 407. Miller's Year 1 is the first time in decades since Detective Comics 33 was published that Batman's origin story was not only updated for the modern age of comics, but also gives us a fantastic look of not only Bruce Wayne's early days as the Batman, but also a look at the character James Gordon becoming a detective turned commissioner within Gotham City, learning about all the crime and corruption within the Gotham City Police Department itself, and how the bond between Commissioner Gordon and Batman actually came to be. And of course, Mazzucchelli's cover to Batman 404 has been reimagined and homaged for over the last now 30 plus years because it is now the quintessential image to depict the death of Bruce Wayne's parents. Our next origin story comes in 1989's one-shot graphic novel, Secret Origins of the World's Greatest Superheroes. And this is another Dennis O'Neil and Dick Giordani classic called The Man Who Falls. This issue not only gives us an overview of Bruce Wayne's origin story turning into the Batman, but also gives us more detail into his time traveling around the world to train his mind and body to return to Gotham to become Batman, which is one of the earliest stories to do so. And of course, The Man Who Falls has inspired so many different outside media, such as TV shows and Batman the Animated Series, to even films such as Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. So if you are a fan of pretty much any outside media and film and television, you have to read The Man Who Falls because that is such a huge foundation of why you probably love those films and those episodes so much. And our last important origin story is a more recent one, and that is by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, and it is the arc Batman Zero Year. This series not only gave an updated origin story within the New 52 era, but it also showcases Bruce Wayne's struggle within his first year of being Batman and going up against early criminals such as the Red Hood, aka the Joker. And of course, Snyder and Capullo have been proven to be such a dynamic duo for the modern Batman mythology, and of course Greg Capullo's art is outstanding. So if you want a more recent origin story, definitely check out Batman Zero Year. Our next group on this list that I wanted to highlight is the alternate universe stories. Now, of course, we like to read stories within the Batman and Detective Comics publication that are within the mainstream continuity. However, there are so many different alternate timelines and stories that Batman has been featured in that have now become not only classics, but also important tales in the evolution of Batman himself. So our first is definitely Frank Miller and Klaus Janson's 1986 4-issue graphic novel, Batman The Dark Knight Returns. Yes, DKR is not set within mainstream continuity. It presents an alternate future. It is on a different Earth rather than the prime Earth that we are used to. And of course, this future depicts a 55-year-old Bruce Wayne who a decade prior retired as the Batman after the death of his sidekick Jason Todd. What crazy foreshadowing, by the way. And Bruce decides to return to the Cape and Cowl after a new threat taunts Gotham City called the Mutant Gang. Oh, and then of course there's this little fight that happens in issue 4 between Batman and Superman. That's probably one of the most iconic fights with not only in Batman's history, but all of DC Comics history. It's just a little thing. It's fine. It didn't just influence an entire movie within the DC Extended Universe or anything like that. No. It's just a little, very small thing. It's safe to say that DKR is an essential read for anybody who enjoys Batman. You have to check it out. You just do. Our next is a one-shot graphic novel written by Brian Augustine and illustrated by Mike Mignola, and it is Batman Gotham by Gaslight. Now, this is an essential alternate universe book, not just because it is the very first Elseworld story within the DC Comics publication, but also it is a fantastic interpretation of Batman, setting him and his entire world within the Victorian era of the late 1800s, while he has to go after a new criminal within Gotham City that is reminiscent of Jack the Ripper. And of course, Batman Gotham by Gaslight was recently made into an animated film, so if you have seen that movie, you have to read the comic. It's so amazing. It's one of my favorite stories to reread over and over again. And I just love Batman's Victorian era costume. It's so cool. Our next alternate universe story is a very important one, and it is Jeff Johns and Andy Kubert's 2011 crossover epic series Flashpoint. Now, this is an essential alternate universe tale that you have to check out, not because it's just a really dope story dealing with Barry Allen's Flash, going back in time, trying to save his mom, changing the entire timeline and everything is just different and he has to figure out a way to get back to his own reality. But it presents probably now one of the most popular versions of Batman, and that is Thomas Wayne's Batman. Because within this alternate universe, Bruce Wayne is the one who dies within Crime Alley, and Thomas and Martha witness the horrific murder of their son, which is such a traumatic event that it makes Thomas Wayne turn into this universe's Batman and drives Martha insane and makes her this universe's Joker. And Thomas Wayne's Batman helps Barry Allen's Flash to get back to his own timeline. Of course, this has been made into an animated film as well, Justice League: The Flashpoint Paradox, which if you enjoy this comic, definitely check out the movie and vice versa. And yes, Thomas Wayne's Batman, so dope. The next alternate universe series that I want to put in here is actually Batman Black and White, which is an anthology series that began in 1996. Now, each issue of Batman Black and White aren't just stories in black and white, but each story has a different writer and artist that tells a brand new story about the Dark Knight and includes all of his mythology, villains, characters, and there's just so many refreshing tales. Of course, this anthology series has been collected in different trade paperbacks and comics, and you can read these for weeks and weeks and weeks. There are so many, and they include some of the most popular and well-known Batman and comic book creators and artists out there. I think it is a very underrated collection of so much talent in one series that doesn't get enough praise. And there are now about 100 statues based off of the Batman Black and White series. I have about, I don't know, a few up here. I have a lot because they are just stunning. I love them. But yes, Batman Black and White is very influential in how creators can tell the story of Batman and make it refreshing and new and so captivating for fans like us. Our last alternate universe story is Jeff Johns and Gary Frank's Batman Earth 1, which was published in 2012 and in 2014. This story presents an alternate reality in different instances, not only within Bruce Wayne's childhood, but as he grows up to be Batman, and it presents probably one of the coolest interpretations of Alfred Pennyworth that has influenced not only the DC Extended Universe's Alfred Pennyworth, who was played by Jeremy Irons, but also the Alfred Pennyworth in the Fox TV series Gotham, portrayed by Sean Pertwee. And many fans even want a continuation of Batman Earth 1 because between focusing on Bruce Wayne turning into Batman and even the evolution of Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face, and in this universe his twin sister, which of course he has a twin sister. Crazy. Batman Earth 1 is a fantastic read, and you can get volumes 1 and 2 right now at your local comic book shop on a digital service. Just go check it out if you have not. It is fantastic, and I really would like an animated film based off of this. I don't know if that will happen, but I would really like to see that come to life. It's so cool. Okay, our next section on this Batman 101 is of course the villains, because Bruce Wayne's Batman is of course the cornerstone of why we love the character. But another huge reason why his mythology is so fun are all of the rogues that he has in his particular gallery. Our first story on this mini list is so underrated. I have no idea why it doesn't get discussed more because it's so good. And that is the 4-issue arc, which was published in 1977, called Where Were You on the Night That Batman Was Killed? A David Verne Reed story that was published between Batman 291 to Batman 294. After the Batman has seemingly died, all of the rogues come out of the woodwork and tell their story of how they were the ones that actually offed the Batman. It's not just a fun and wonderfully drawn story by John Cowlan, but it is also the first Batman story that features over 10 Batman villains in one issue. Not just a wonderful Batman villain story to read, but also great Batman Bronze Age tale that you have to have in your collection. Our next story is of course an essential, not just villain story, but also Batman story, and that is Alan Moore and Brian Boland's 1988 one-shot graphic novel, Batman the Killing Joke. This one-shot graphic novel not only gives probably the best telling of the Joker's possible and most popular origin story, but also depicts the trauma that Joker puts Barbara Gordon and her father, Commissioner James Gordon, through, all to drive not just them insane, but the Batman insane, to prove his point that it only takes one bad day to turn a sane man completely insane. And if you didn't like the animated version where Barbara Gordon and Bruce Wayne have a romantic relationship, you're like, that's really weird, I don't like that, just read the comic because the rest of that movie is literally the exact same thing as the comic. But check out the comic, the art by Brian Bolland, and the first edition with John Higgins. Crazy colors. I love those colors. A lot of people don't, but I do. But yes, check out all of that. The next story is another one of my favorites, and it is an essential, and that is the 1993 through 1994 epic arc Batman Nightfall. A Batman crossover series predominantly written by creators such as Doug Moench and Chuck Dixon. Batman Nightfall depicts the villain Bane systematically taking down Bruce Wayne's Batman mentally and physically. And once he has succeeded, he goes and literally breaks Bruce Wayne's back. Following this tragic event, Bruce Wayne asks John Paul Valley to take up the Batman mantle for a brief period of time while Bruce heals from his injuries, which is all laid out in the arc Batman Night Quest. And then once Bruce Wayne heals, he has to literally fight to take back the mantle, which is laid out in Batman Night's End. Now, this story has been published in many different trades and volumes, so it is very, very easy to collect. But if you do want to look at the one issue where Bane breaks Batman's back, check out Batman issue 497, which is the very first comic that I ever read. Our last essential villain story is Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee's 2002 through 2003 series Batman Hush, which was originally published in Batman issue 608 to 619. This story, along with David Verne Reen's Bronze Age tale and even Batman Nightfall, depicts most, if not all, of Batman's rogues gallery in this one story that follows a new rogue within Gotham City that is trying to destroy the Batman, because they're all trying to destroy the Batman in some way. And this story is a fan favorite. It was just made into the latest DC Comics animated movie, and it just has amazing and now iconic visuals and just storyline. And of course, this has been collected in a few trade paperbacks, and there also is a 15th anniversary edition of Batman Hush that you should definitely pick up. Our last essential villain story is probably the most modern one, and that is Tom King and Michael Jannon's The War of Jokes and Riddles, which is in between 2017 and 2018's Batman Volume 3, issues 25 through 32. A part of Tom King's very, very fantastic run. This story is within year 2 of Bruce Wayne being Batman, and he has to fight Joker and the Riddler, who are battling themselves to figure out who is the greatest villain. It's not just a great Batman story, but it is a very cool Riddler story, and I feel like Riddler is another underrated character that doesn't get enough shine within Batman comics, and the art is fantastic, so I definitely recommend checking out that story. Quickly, I wanted to highlight a few very important Batman family stories that you should check out if you want to learn more about the development and evolution of the Bat family over the last 80 years or so. And I only say that because our first story is from 1940, and that is Detective Comics 38, which is of course the debut of Dick Grayson, aka the very first Robin the Boy Wonder, who was dubbed the sensational find of 1940, and gives Dick Grayson's origin story after the death of his parents by mob boss Tony Zuko. This story is important not just because of his debut of probably one of the greatest Batman characters of all time, Dick Grayson. I am a Dick Grayson fangirl, I'm sorry, but it is technically the beginning of the Batman family, period. Our next essential Bat family story is of course the debut of my other very, very favorite character, and that is Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl. And she debuted in the 1967 story, the $1 million debut of Batgirl, which was originally published in Detective Comics issue 359, which I proudly own an original copy. It is like I have a shrine. Maybe I'll show the shrine one day, but Babs. Gardner Fox and Carmen Infantino classic story was created right along Yvonne Craig's Batgirl being debuted in the Batman live action TV series. And of course, Barbara Gordon becomes an important part of the Bat family and played an important role during the female empowerment movement of the 1960s, being a female Batman family member that wasn't just dating Bruce Wayne or dating Robin, and was a bona fide hero herself. The next essential Batman family story is Battle for the Cowl, which was written and illustrated by Tony S. Daniel and was published right after the apparent death of Bruce Wayne's Batman in 2009's Final Crisis. Of course, the status quo of the entire Bat family had to change because they had to figure out literally who was going to be Batman because Bruce Wayne died. And literally everyone was fighting to be Batman. Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Tim Drake, even Damian Wayne. And of course we discover that Dick Grayson is the one to take up the mantle once again. And for the next few years, up until really the New 52, Dick Grayson was the current Batman alongside Damian Wayne as Robin. Battle for the Cowl is not just a good story, but if you just want to see many of the Batman family members dressed up and being Batman, running around Gotham City, being insane, this is the story for you. Our next story is another Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo awesome book, and it is Batman Death of the Family, which of course the title pays homage to Batman Death in the Family, which I don't believe it is on my essentials list. Maybe it's not, but it is an essential. So check out that story. Jim Starlin, Jim Aparo, Jason Todd dying, Joker beating him up with a crowbar. It's just all really important to check out and devastating, but important. Anyway, sidetrack. This 2012 to 2013 story shows the Joker returning to Gotham City and basically trying to take out the entire Bat family so him and Batman can finally be alone. Because the Joker literally believes that the Batman family is stopping Batman from rising to his full potential as a Dark Knight within Gotham City. He believes that the Bat family makes Batman weak. So he thinks that he has to eliminate the Bat family in order for them to have the relationship that they both deserve with one another. Because let's face it, they love each other. It's a very complex dynamic. Death of the Family is another arc that I read over and over again because the art is fantastic, the tie-in issues are so good, and it's just an insane Joker story. If you like Joker, definitely have to read that. And then our last Batman family story that I want to throw in is not just a Batman family story, but just a good Batman story that includes everybody and everything. Villains, Bat Family, GCPD, Gotham City iconography, Batman iconography, everything. And that is the year-long 52-issue series Batman Eternal. Literally, it was weekly. I was exhausted. My wallet yelled at me. It was ridiculous. But I read it! Batman Eternal is now collected in a trade paperback. This is actually an important Batman family tale because it sees the return of Stephanie Brown's spoiler within the Bat family. So yes, check that out. Our last mini list on this huge Batman 101 list is what I just dubbed Essentials. These are just a few stories that weren't mentioned in our previous list, but you have to read because they are just so important to the evolution of Batman. Our first one is Detective Comics issue 27, which came out on March 30th, 1939. And of course, that is the very first issue that Bruce Wayne, Batman, and even Commissioner James Gordon was featured in. And of course, it was written by Bill Finger and illustrated by Bob Kane. If you have to start anywhere reading Batman, read Detective Comics 27. Our next is one of my favorite series, and that is the late 1970s arc Batman Strange Apparitions, which was written by Steve Englehart, Walt Simonson, Len Wein, and illustrated by Marshall Rogers. This story not only introduces important characters such as Rupert Thorne and Silver St. Cloud, but also gives us now iconic storylines such as the Laughing Fish, and overall shows Bruce Wayne as a more three-dimensional character, and the first time really looking at the struggles of having a dual identity of being Bruce Wayne and Batman. The next essential is 1999's year-long epic saga Batman No Man's Land, which of course I have talked about in several videos. I even did a 1-minute bat history on Batman No Man's Land, which was very difficult because there are so many comics. Like if you want to go and check out the trades, there's like about 5, 6, 7 trades because it's just so huge. But so good. It's not only a good essential, but it is an essential story to learn about Gotham City, an essential looking at the Batman family. It introduces Cassandra Cain, who becomes the next Batgirl. It brings Harley Quinn into the Batman comic book canon, and overall it is just a really fantastic look at Batman's world in one of the biggest crises that him and his city had ever faced at the time. And you gotta love a good crisis. The next story, which I also think is another underrated story that doesn't get enough hype in many of these lists, is whatever happened to the Caped Crusader, which is another story that was written by Neil Gaiman and was published in 2009's Batman issue 686 and Detective Comics 853. And these two comics highlight what Gotham City, the villains, the Batman family, how they all reacted to the apparent death of Bruce Wayne after Final Crisis. Detective Comics 853 focuses on Batman actually having a conversation with his mother, Martha Wayne, and her telling him that he is so important because he is Batman. His role within Gotham City is essential to the protection and the progression of his beloved city. At the time, it was dubbed the last Batman story, and it was such a big deal. Whatever happened to the Caped Crusader? So good! And our last essentials is a very recent one because I wanted to throw in a DC Rebirth series that I thought you guys have to read. And of course, if you want to start with DC Rebirth, definitely read Tom King and David Finch's arc, I Am Gotham, which was published in Batman Volume 3, issues 1 through 5. It's not only a cool story focusing on Batman running into two new heroes of Gotham, but it also puts a microscope on Batman and Gotham City's relationship. I know that sounds weird, but Batman and Gotham are so tied. His territorial self that we see in many different arcs over the last several decades kind of comes to the forefront, and we see how Bruce Wayne's Batman deals with that and what the result of that is. It's very interesting. I like Tom King's run personally. I think that he dives deep into the mind of Bruce Wayne, what makes him tick, what makes him just go insane, and I like that because I like focusing on Bruce Wayne, the person, and how that reflects on Batman, the hero. But that's just me. That story, I Am Gotham, is already collected in a trade paperback. If you don't want to collect issues 1 through 5, I definitely recommend it. And of course, that story is just one of the many stories that we discussed on this Batman 101 list. Now, of course, there are many other stories that would be like, you need to read this, you need to read this. But then if I did that, we'd be here for days. But I do think if you have not read a single Batman comic and you really do want to dive in, these issues, depending on especially what you want to focus on, if you want a good origin story, if you want a good villain story, if you want a good alternate universe story, if you just want a good Batman family story, or if you just want to do the essentials, all of these stories are perfect for you to check out and will hopefully start you on your long and fun journey of learning more about Batman through the source material of comic books. Thank you guys so much for watching this Batman 101 guide to help you start reading Batman comic books. If you enjoyed this video, please give a bat thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what story you think is an essential and what stories you would recommend other Gothamites within this community to read. Let us all know. As always, all of my social media is linked in the description below, so why don't you give it a follow and become a Gothamite? Check out my videos for a DC Comics DC Fans channel, and of course, please subscribe to this channel so you can become a part of this Batman community. It would mean so much to me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will have more history of the Batman soon, right here on YouTube. Remember, Gothamites, all about peace, love, and Batman. Bye.